Good evening, everyone. Michael Soothing here, coming to you on Memorial Day. I just wanted to do a short ASMR today and discuss Memorial Day just a little bit. Just a ramble off the top of my head, a thinking out loud type video. One of the things people get a little confused on, those who are from some of the younger generations, is the difference between Veterans Day and Memorial Day. Well, Veterans Day is when we honor all of those servicemen and women who have served in the armed forces on behalf of their country. And, they're out of the service now. They're veterans. They've done their service. And they're generally thanked for their service by most of us who appreciate it. But Memorial Day is when we remember those who died in the service of their country in armed conflict. I have a little graphic here that kind of illustrates it a little bit. If you go to any of the military cemeteries or Arlington, there's a big one in the San Francisco area that I've seen in the past, some of you have seen. You have all those white markers, thousands and thousands of them, and it represents all of those brave armed forces service people who went off and died in war. Memorial Day goes back to pre-World War I, and we won't talk about World War I, but since that time we had World War II, we have had the Korean War and the Vietnam War, and then of course some of the Middle East conflicts and things. And World War II in particular represents, I think, all of those who truly sacrificed for their country. The United States was trying to stay out of that war at first until Pearl Harbor was attacked, even though Great Britain was desperately hoping to get our involvement as an ally. We originally were trying to stay neutral as a country until it became clear that the Axis powers weren't going to stop. We'll have another video sometime. I had a request on doing some history, including things like World War II. And we'll do that in the future when I can have all the facts at my disposal. Far more people died in that conflict and in that World War II than in any other wars that have occurred. All the major countries that were a strong political power were involved in World War II in one way or the other. Even far-flung places like Australia, because of the theater of the Pacific, the the Japanese war for Asia and China, Southeast Asia, and the War of the Pacific. Then of course we had the war in the Atlantic as far as naval warfare. I don't know if you realize, but German wolf packs were sinking merchant ships off the shores of the East Coast before we got involved in the ground war in Europe. And, kind of preemptively, of course, Hitler had declared war on the United States. I think it was 2 or 3 days after Japan attacked Pearl Harbor. So he thought that would be a good time, since we'd be spread thin and since we were obviously now going to get involved. But that's not, the history is not really what we're here to talk about. I want to think about, it's always amazed me when I think about those young men who went off to war in World War II to another continent, whether it was to Europe or to Asia, to the Philippines, to all the naval warfare that went on, all the places that they had to go. And those who died in that war lost everything. They lost all opportunity to ever come home and have a life. They lost their wife, their girlfriend, their future children. Excuse me while I take a sip of water. It is May, which is allergy season. I might have to whisper this video, but that's okay for ASMR, isn't it? In any case, I'm amazed at what these guys gave up, and they did it without complaint. You know, in these days, we're so spoiled, and our young people haven't faced hardship and warfare for the most part. They haven't faced dictatorships that want to take away their country and their life. They may in the future, the way things are going, but they haven't so far. So people protest over the tiniest little things. I don't like the kind of signs on the bathroom, they're not gender neutral enough, or, my neighbor built a fence and it's 6 inches over my surveyed property line, so I'm going to start a feud and we'll start shooting at each other. We get wound up about the stupidest stuff now. There's a dog barking next door, and so, I think I'll make it a federal offense and get murderous with my neighbor. Oh wait, I'm guilty of that one myself. So you see, I acknowledge being a hypocrite myself from time to time. Anyway, we need to stop when we have that tendency. When someone cuts us off in traffic and we want to do a road rage and put our children's life at stake in our car, we need to stop and pause and say, what was it like for the generations of men and women who went off and gave their lives without complaint and lost everything, lost all their future potential, vacations and their home and their children and whatever they would have enjoyed in, battling for the future freedom of the country and the rest of us against incredibly evil regimes and dictators. So when we think about that, and we think about remembering those people and those men who sacrificed so much, it could help us put our own life in perspective and stop being whining crybabies so much, right? And think, wow, they didn't get anything in return. No one went to court and sued and said, I want to be compensated. A lot of them came back and lost limbs and lost friends and all kinds of other things, For those who did survive, the war was such a brutal, dehumanizing experience, not only because of the injuries and the hardships in seeing their friends blown up or killed, but the psychological effects, and of course even the emotional and psychological effect of having to kill other human beings. Maybe you came from a very peaceful existence on a farm in Kansas or something, and here you are out trying to shoot other human beings or blow them up. It's got to be a life-changing thing that you're going to suffer with for the rest of your life. I remember when I first started working, my first job, I was 14 years old, and I was working at a conference center, Mount Hermon, and where I also grew up. And so I went to work there, and there was an old guy there who was about 66 or 67 at the time, a guy named Sid. And this guy was a veteran of World War II, and he was your typical older guy, real gruff and, kind of sharp-edged, He'd bark at you if you did the wrong thing, but he had a really good heart, and you could see he had a soft spot for people and liked to help people. But I remember this guy, he didn't want to talk about the war very much at all. And I remember whenever there was a loud noise, like a loud bang, every single time he would he was shell-shocked even at that age. And he had been there as a young man, in his late teens and early 20s. But it was a lifelong lasting effect, the shell shock for him. Any loud bang and he was immediately startled, and that part of his mind still created the fight or flight response because of what he had been through. And then you think about the guys who did not make it back, and that's what Memorial Day is really about. They went over and suffered short lives of deprivation and hardship, cold and heat and dirt and sweat and terror and carnage. War is a horrible thing. We used to glorify it in movies and things. All the sanitized movies they used to make in the 50s and 60s. And these days, though, in more current times, as movies got more realistic, there were two or three, a few film directors and who came up with something a little bit more realistic. I know that today, for example, the movie Saving Private Ryan will be on about World War II, and that does a much better job of giving you the flavor of the futility, or I should say, not the futility of war. We had to fight that war, or we would have been turned into bar of soap and lampshades by the Nazis, but, and Japan had to be contained, or they would have overrun all of China, all of Asia, Burma, India, you name it, eventually. But nonetheless, it's man's inhumanity to man come to the forefront that you have to push back sometimes. And we rely on guys to do it who get virtually nothing by way of proper recognition or payment for that. So that's what we're doing on Memorial Day, is we're thinking about those guys who went and stopped the Holocaust, stopped the expansion of a brutal, horrific regime that was committing the worst atrocities known to man everywhere they went because of an ideology they had. Unfortunately, we have a similar scourge spreading throughout the world today, which I will not discuss in this video, but maybe we'll discuss it some future time. This isn't the time or place for that. This is the time for us to stop and think and remember the guys who died in service to their country and in service to the rest of us. And we never got to give them anything by way of a proper thank you. So Memorial Day is our time to reflect and be appreciative not only of what they did, but what we enjoy as a consequence. So next time you're thinking about, being angry at the neighbor and starting a feud, because their cat came and, ate a piece of grass in your lawn or something, stop for a second and say, is it really that important? Think about what's happened in the past and the magnitude of it and what others have given up with nothing in return. And then it helps put the rest of your life into perspective. So that's basically what I wanted to talk about today. This is just a short one because I have a lot of things I have to do and my voice is gone, as you can see. So I'm whispering more out of necessity than out of relaxation, because otherwise I'd be soft-spoken today. So again, think about the sacrifices these guys made for you and for me, and that'll help you think about the bigger picture someday. You can think about the sacrifice Christ made on the cross for everyone, for example, instead of having that little tiff with someone at work where maybe you're each being a little egotistical or petty or something, and you can just instead let it go, do the big thing, be the one that's on the right side by letting it go, even if the other person's in the wrong, because you will be the one who benefits. Now, I don't mean to get on my high horse and lecture anyone today. That's not what Memorial Day is about either. So excuse me if I'm sounding that way, because really this is advice to myself, okay? I told you I'm thinking out loud. I get annoyed too easily, and I need to think to myself, why should I get annoyed with a driver in front of me who's going walking speed in a 55 zone, okay? Is it going to kill me to get to my destination now that I'm retired? Will it kill me to get there a little bit later than I expected when I didn't have a deadline to meet? No. Okay, so let it go. Lower the blood pressure and instead turn around and think, wow, the things that happened for us in the past, the things people did for us that enables us to have this good life that we have now and all the benefits we have now. Yeah, we need to be thankful for that and remember those folks in the small town that I live close to on the Oregon coast. They erected in a triangle, like a little tiny park thing. Mind you, this is a very small town of only a few thousand people, like 7,000 or less. They put up a monument, and it's a four-sided monument, with plaques on it. And the first side has those, the names of those from the small town who died in World War II. The next side has those who died in the Korean conflict, which is called the Forgotten War sometimes. I'll pause and discuss that for a moment. I had a boss who was a Marine, and real gruff guy, a guy named Bob. And Bob was a really tough character. But his bark was bigger than his bite. Another one of those guys who had a soft spot in him, but had been hardened on the exterior by his experiences. He went to the Korean War, fought in the Korean War, and people never think about the Korean War. Now we've got North Korea getting ready to try to threaten the entire planet with nuclear weapons. And so people might start thinking a little bit more about it again. But back then, nobody wanted to deal with it. It was like, hey, we finished World War II. We're tired of this whole war thing. We don't want to deal with it anymore. And so it's called, and later we had the Vietnam conflict, but most of America eventually turned against that conflict for a variety of good reasons in most cases. But the Korean War was right in the middle there, and it just wasn't really followed or publicized. And so those guys, those vets, felt particularly forgotten. And the guys who died in that conflict, it just seems as if nobody was remembering them. So on this plaque in this small town, one side has World War II, then there's the next side has the Korean conflict, those who died there. The third side has Vietnam casualties, and there's not very many because it is a small town, but there's a few. And then the final side is for those who names are still being added, those who lose their lives in foreign conflicts in places like Afghanistan, fighting against that scourge that I referred to earlier, that is spreading like a cancer in every country in the world right now. Another ideology, I must say, in this case not a country, not a government, not a race, but an ideology that is affecting every country and race at the moment. So, but we'll refrain from discussing that because instead I was making the point that we had even here in a small town. And I stopped one day last week, and I did it again yesterday. I stopped and started reading the names because I thought that would be a fitting thing for Memorial Day. And I tried to think about what these guys' lives might have been like and what it was they gave up when they didn't get to come back to this beautiful place where I get to live now in my later years. And I thought to myself, wow, we all owe them such a debt of gratitude. So don't run around thanking vets for their service today on Memorial Day. Save that for Veterans Day. Instead, just give them appreciation because they're especially going to be sensitive to what others sacrificed with their lives in foreign wars. So that's all I wanted to talk about today. But I will come back with some more ASMR in the near future, since I haven't been making quite so many lately, being quite busy. But I still have that long list of stuff, and I'll get to it eventually. Meanwhile, yeah, I'm going to, in my prayers, be thankful for what these guys did on our behalf. Take care, everyone, and don't ASMR and drive. Until next time.